Welcome to this technical summary on hybrid particle field molecular dynamics, focusing on the paper titled Hybrid Particle Field Molecular Dynamics. This presentation addresses the question, how does the hybrid particle field molecular dynamics, or HPFMD approach work, and why is it a valuable technique in molecular simulations? Traditional molecular dynamics simulations, while powerful, face challenges in computational cost, especially when simulating large or complex systems. HPFMD offers a method that blends particles and continuous fields, allowing for efficient yet detailed modeling. This hybrid approach retains molecular details through particles, but replaces expensive computation of pairwise non-bonded interactions with interactions between particles in a smooth density field, thus significantly improving computational efficiency. The fundamental strategy relies on representing non-bonded interactions as interactions between particles and self-consistently calculated density fields on spatial grids. These fields are updated periodically during the simulation to reflect changes in particle positions. This method reduces the need for costly neighborless calculations and double loops over particle pairs encountered in traditional MD. By interpreting the system through fields that describe local particle densities and their spatial derivatives, HPFMD retains important thermodynamic and structural properties, while enabling simulations on larger time and length scales. In this primer, the authors provide a comprehensive overview of the formulation, computational implementation, validation, and diverse applications of HPFMD, touching on polymer systems, nanoparticle. Figure 1 offers illustrative snapshots of a single bead system evolving from a mixed initial configuration. These snapshots depict different stages of system evolution, demonstrating the behavior of the single bead particles governed by the HPFMD approach. The authors note an interesting finding involving a critical exponent in HPFMD simulations that deviates from the expected mean field value of 0.5. Despite the inherently mean field origin of the method. This suggests that while the method is based on mean field theory, emergent behaviors can show subtle differences, emphasizing the nuanced dynamics captured. Additionally, it is mentioned that alternative equations of state could be incorporated, and that while the Flory interaction parameter is temperature-dependent, the cohesive energy part of the functional remains fixed in HPFMD. This figure thus grounds the methodology with a basic example illustrating system evolution. Figure 2 provides insight into the computational iteration scheme used in HPFMD simulations, as well as methods for assigning particles to lattice points. Panel A illustrates the iteration scheme and relative pseudocode, outlining the simulation steps. Starting at time t0, the system's density-dependent external potential is established based on particle positions. Forces on particles arise from intramolecular interactions such as bonds, angles, and dihedrals, combined with density-dependent interactions derived from the external potential. The particles' equations of motion are integrated over a time step to produce updated configurations. After a preset density update interval, the particle positions are used to recalculate the coarse-grained density field values on a mesh, which in turn yield updated external potentials and forces. Panel B illustrates the particle assignment to lattice points in 2 dimensions, describing how fractions of a particle's density are attributed to neighboring mesh points according to distance. This interpolation is central to computing smooth density fields and their derivatives, defined on Cartesian lattices with periodic boundary conditions. The main computational advantage of the HPFMD method lies in replacing the costly double loops over particle pairs for non-bonded force calculations with a more efficient single loop over particles and grid. Figure 3 examines the computational performance profiles and parallelization strategy of the HPFMD method compared against standard molecular dynamics, MD. Panel A shows serial code profiles indicating that over 80% of simulation time in conventional MD is dedicated to calculating intermolecular forces and managing neighbor lists, which are computationally expensive steps. In HPFMD, these are effectively replaced by particle field force calculations that scale more efficiently. Panels B through E detail the parallelization approach implemented. Molecules are allocated to processors based on molecular decomposition, regardless of spatial location. Each processor owns the particles of the assigned molecules and calculates the associated intramolecular forces. Density fields needed for non-bonded force calculations are computed individually per processor from owned molecules. Then, a global MPI all-reduce operation sums these partial densities across processors to obtain the full density field. This strategy minimizes communication overhead, as density updates are required only at predefined intervals, and force computations between updates are fully parallel without inter-processor communication. An example with 4 processors handling 8 molecules demonstrates this. Figure 4 compares 2 coarse graining strategies, vertical and horizontal approaches. The vertical coarse graining approach involves mapping information from finer atomic level descriptions to coarser levels, commonly employed in methods like reverse Monte Carlo or iterative Boltzmann inversion, and in parametrizing classical force fields from quantum chemistry. This path moves downward in resolution to build simplified models. By contrast, the horizontal approach, depicted in the lower panel representing the HPF method, maintains 2 representations at the same level. Particle-based and field-based descriptions coexist simultaneously. Such an approach allows capturing molecular detail and mean field effects concurrently. The authors liken this horizontal scheme to QM-MN simulations where quantum and classical regions coexist, or to electronic self-consistent field methods like Hartree-Fock, in which individual electrons interact with an averaged field of others. Figure 5 highlights applications of HPF-MD in modeling lipid and surfactant assemblies. Panel A shows the coarse-grained mapping scheme for DPPC lipids, water, and Triton X100 surfactants following the Martini framework. Panel B presents snapshots capturing the spontaneous self-assembly of DPPC lipids into distinct morphologies as the water concentration varies. These include reverse micelles, bilayers, bicelles, and micelles transitioning from low to high water content, reproducing experimentally observed structures. Hexagonal packing of tubular aggregates is observed at reduced water content. The HPF particle field model effectively captures complex phase behaviors, including micelle shape transitions and emergence of hexagonal ordered phases validated against experimental ranges. Panel D illustrates the insertion and rearrangement of carbon nanotube bundles inside lipid bilayers, revealing lipid coating and membrane distortions that suggest mechanisms of membrane poration and disruption. Panel E shows simulations of pleronic micelles interacting with lipid bilayers, capturing chain migration from micelles to bilayers consistent with experimental findings. Simulations indicate that interactions between drugs and micelle cores and block copolymers and bilayers stabilize micelle structures, with drug hydrophobicity influencing equilibrium micelle size. This figure demonstrates the versatility. Figure 6 explores HPF-MD applications to charged polymer systems and membrane lipids. Panel A presents typical conformations of a polyelectrolyte chain in solution under varying relative dielectric constants, 3.9, 20.0, and 78.0, illustrating the coil-to-globule transition as solvent polarity changes. The authors use the HPF-MD extension that incorporates electrostatics to simulate such charged systems, showing that chain sizes converge towards values obtained via standard MD when grid resolution approaches particle size. Panel B highlights phase separation in block copolymers induced by salt, modeled with Martini-like mapping within HPF models. Furthermore, CG models of charged surfactants like SDS and lipid bilayers including palmitoyl oleol phosphatadyl glycerol have been proposed and validated, enabling explanations of micellar morphologies at varying concentrations. Panel D focuses on biological variants of lipid A, showing HPF-MD predicts lamellar and micellar phases, along with spontaneous vesiculation from fusion of micellar aggregates. These applications underscore the adaptability of HPF-MD to complex charged polymer and biological. Figure 7 illustrates the modeling of carbon nanotube (CNT) assemblies using HPF-MD simulations. Panel A shows snapshots of CNT aggregates of varying lengths, 15 nanometers, 28 nanometers, and 43 nanometers, highlighting how bundle morphology evolves with aspect ratio. Longer CNTs form dendritic structures with bundles connected by a few individual CNTs, matching experimental observations of a two-level multiscale assembly. The authors interpret these morphologies as consistent with experimental data on electrical percolation behavior, with conductivity power law exponents around 1.7 for kinetically percolated systems and near 2.0 for homogeneously dispersed CNTs. Panel B depicts self-assembled CNT structures templated by lamellar morphologies of symmetric block copolymers. Panel C presents isosurfaces of temperature within different CNT assembly regions during simulations of Joule heating after applying external electrical potential. These results demonstrate HPFMD's. Figure 8 examines coarse-grained modeling and interactions of polymer nanocomposites, specifically polystyrene and silicon nanoparticles, NPs, using HPFMD. Panel A depicts the mapping scheme adopted for atactic polystyrene, where intramolecular interactions are parametrized via iterative Boltzmann inversion to reproduce atomistic reference data, and non-bonded interactions calibrated to reproduce density profiles. Panel B shows typical simulation configurations of bare and grafted silicon nanoparticles separated by various distances within a polystyrene matrix. Thermodynamic integration is applied to compute potential of mean force, PMF, for nanoparticle separation, including effects of a third particle to capture three-body interactions. The authors interpret these PMF results in terms of entropic and enthalpic contributions, regulating nanoparticle dispersion and aggregation morphologies. Experimentally observed structures, such as nanoparticle strings at low grafting densities, are rationalized. Figure 9 focuses on modeling the hierarchical structural organization of carbon black and CB fillers and their interaction with polymer chains. Panel A schematizes the multiscale organization of CB aggregates, starting from atomic or molecular scales, approximately 1 nanometer or less, characterized by adsorption sites on the CB surface, to microcrystallites arranged in spherical primary particles of about 10 nanometers radius. Primary particles cluster into aggregates typically consisting of 9 to 10 units with radii near 30 nanometers. This hierarchy critically influences miscibility and dispersion in polymer composites, as well as the interfacial properties. Panel B compares conformations of polymer chains adsorbed on CB surfaces with those on idealized flat surfaces, demonstrating the importance of realistic CB morphology. The authors note that the computational efficiency of the HPF coarse-grained model enables simulations of realistically sized CB primary particles embedded in polyethylene melts with detailed surface descriptions. An optimized parallel molecular dynamics code, OCM, facilitates runs with over 8 million beads, enabling. Figure 10 presents the application of HPFMD to generate detailed polymer melt structures and subsequent validation against experimental and fully atomistic data. Panel A illustrates an equilibration procedure involving successive MD simulations with progressively finer density grid resolutions applied to polymethyl methacrylate, PMMA. This multi-resolution approach enables the generation of all atom structures that reproduce key structural correlations observed in extended fully atomistic MD runs, but at substantially reduced computational cost. Panel B compares radial distribution functions from HPFMD and long conventional simulations, demonstrating the ability of HPFMD to capture subtle chemical structure details when suitable grid resolution is chosen. Complementing this, X-ray scattering data from experiments, classical MD, and HPFMD agree closely, further validating the approach. The authors also have extended this methodology to polypropylene melts, exploring sensitivity to chain tacticity, and to more complex polymers such as polyetheramines, obtaining relaxed atomistic configurations that match experimental scattering and spectroscopic measurements. Uniquely, this coarse graining method allows resolution changes without needing special algorithms or back mapping because all atomic degree. Figure 11 continues the investigation of polypropylene using HPFMD, focusing on stereochemistry and chain conformations. Panel A depicts the chemical motifs defining racemo and mesodiads, which govern tacticity, the stereochemical arrangement of side groups along polymer chains. Panel B compares the fractions of gauche and trans conformations from HPF-MD simulations with literature results from LOM all-atom MD, showing good agreement, indicating HPF-MD captures subtle effects of tacticity on chain structure. Panel C displays structure factors, with experimental values compared to those predicted by HPF-MD, validating molecular-level accuracy in describing melt organization. Panel D extends application to complex polymers like polyetheramides, PEI, with chemical structures shown alongside calculated X-ray scattering curves, agreeing well with experiments. The authors also report relaxed all-atom models used to study water and carbon dioxide behaviors within PEI matrices, verified by spectroscopic data. Notably, HPF-MD maintains all atom degrees of freedom during resolution changes, eliminating the need for special backmapping algorithms. These results. Figure 12 compares simulation snapshots from hybrid particle field molecular dynamics using two different thermostating and hydrodynamics approaches, MPCD and Anderson thermostat. Panel A shows results after 50,000 time steps using multi-particle collision dynamics, MPCD, which introduces collisions among particles and long-range hydrodynamic interactions. This method induces velocity autocorrelation function fluctuations and negative values at short times, reflecting particle caging effects. These effects become amplified in less compressible systems or with reduced compressibility parameter values. Panel B depicts results after 1 million time steps using an Anderson thermostat, which does not incorporate hydrodynamics explicitly. The direct comparison indicates that MPCD accelerates membrane formation by including Figure 13 evaluates polymer chain dynamics within the HPF-MD framework, particularly examining the inclusion of slip spring models to mimic entanglement effects. Panel A compares end-to-end distance distributions for atomistic polyethylene models, showing that adding slip springs within HPF-MD only slightly affects chain conformations, maintaining consistency with typical MD results. This indicates the capability to represent topological constraints without distorting structural properties. Panel B presents dynamical analyses including mean square displacements and reorientational relaxation times, which align well with conventional MD simulations and theoretical expectations over long time scales, despite minor deviations at shorter times. The authors describe a combined approach named Roberto that integrates slip springs with HPF representation for coarse-grained polymer models, allowing observation of rectation and tube theory behavior with quantitative predictive power. This figure underscores HPF-MD's ability to realistically represent polymer chain dynamics and entanglements, essential for modeling viscoelastic properties and complex macromolecular behaviors. In conclusion, the hybrid particle field molecular dynamics method exemplifies a powerful and versatile computational approach to molecular simulation. By replacing expensive pairwise non-bonded force calculations with particle interactions mediated through density fields, HPF-MD addresses long-standing computational bottlenecks, enabling efficient simulation of large and complex soft matter systems. The approach effectively bridges molecular detail and mean field representations, providing a horizontal coarse graining strategy that captures both structural and thermodynamic properties with fidelity. We have seen applications spanning polymer melts with detailed stereochemistry, lipid membranes, micelle formation, nanoparticle dispersions, and carbon nanotube assemblies, each demonstrating HPF-MD's capacity to reproduce experimentally observed morphologies and dynamic behaviors. The computational strategies outlined, including parallelization schemes and incorporation of slip springs and hydrodynamics, further enhance accuracy and scalability. The method's unique ability to retain atomic degrees of freedom during resolution changes without special backmapping opens new avenues for multi-scale modeling without sacrificing detail or efficiency. Collectively, These advances position HPF-MD as a compelling framework